was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose.
Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. Today, we will be speaking with an organization called Project Rozana. They are an organization that works on peace through the medical community. Daily in their work, they save Palestinian and Israeli lives. Project Rozana uses healthcare to build bridges to peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians by providing training, treatment, and transportation by Israeli medical partners. Project Rozana helps to create a more sustainable Palestinian health system and improves the quality of life for Palestinians. Project Rozana initiates and facilitates projects as well as funds operational partners. Bound together, their projects foster broad networks of Palestinian and Israeli stakeholders working together to optimize health outcomes. Ellen Shimberg is the U.S. Director of Development and Communications for Project Rozana. She has over 20 years' experience in the nonprofit space, with much of her work in development, fundraising, and strategic operations, with particular emphasis on marginalized and underserved communities. She has conducted interfaith workshops on building trust, supporting aging in place, and interactions with disenfranchised youth. Ellen is a board member and active volunteer with Heroic Gardens, a female-led veteran support organization, and Disability Pride Pennsylvania, a disability rights organization. She is native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Ellen.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Ellen, how would you describe Project Rozana?
I know what our mission is, and it's building bridges to peace through healthcare. But I would say that really what Project Rozana is a grassroots initiative to help build better understanding between peoples who've been told we shouldn't be getting along, and really working at the ground level in the communities to show that we really do have more in common with each other than perhaps we've been led to believe.
When did it start?
Project Rozana started in 2013, so we'll be celebrating our 10-year anniversary next year.
That's great.
The past few years in particular have shown some really incredible growth within our organization and expansion across the globe to really become a global force for good in an area, in a region that is typically not seen as positive.
Well, before we go much further, I want to show a little clip about why you're called Project Rozana.
Rozana fell from the 9th floor of her house in a village near Ramallah. Her mother insisted at the IDF checkpoint that she must take her only to Hadassah.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Because you see my daughter. If there is something wrong in the first, with the treatment, I don't think she will be okay like this. This is miracle of life. Also, I want to talk something, maybe it's very sensitive, but I'm a Palestinian woman. I'm from Jerusalem. I have Israel ID, but I don't have citizen. All the time we talk about the conflict between Palestinian and Israel, but in Hadassah and Karim, you feel that you are a human being, just a human being, without politics, without religions, without colors, without anything.
This always gets to me. I mean,
Me too.
as a mom, you can imagine, oh my God, falling from so
Sure.
many stories and wanting the best care for your child and getting it from what often they're told is the enemy.
Correct.
You want to kind of expand upon exactly what happened with this?
So what's challenging for those who've never been to the region, the checkpoints, there's 2 lanes to get out of Palestine. One is for Israelis, one is for Palestinians. And you can imagine that time is of the essence, especially when you're dealing in an emergency. So the fact that Rozana's mom was really doing what I would like to think any of us, not just any parent, any guardian would do for a child who is hurt. You risk everything to make sure they get the help that they need. And because she was so tenacious and she got where she needed to go, Rozana not only was saved, but is thriving and doing well. The other side of the coin is that she got to Hadassah Hospital, and the Israelis didn't say, no, you can't come here because you're Palestinian, and turn her away. They immediately took her in and provided treatment. I think that's a misconception a lot of people have about the region, that there's this, you can't go here and some people can go here. I think the medical community really in particular has a mission that they stick to with regard to, we're going to help people regardless of where they're coming from. And that sort of the grassroots, what got Project Rozana started was, well, if it worked for Rozana, how many other children are in Palestine that could be treated in medical hospitals in Israel? And then how do we build a program so that maybe they don't have to come over to Israel all the time, and that we can help build capacity in partnership with hospitals and the medical community within Palestine? And we have been greeted with tremendous outpouring of support and interest in a way that I think a lot of people wouldn't expect Palestinians and Israelis to be able to work together.
So how are Israelis and Arabs involved, both as the medical team and as the patients?
Well, there's a couple of different ways to get involved with us. One of the things we've done is we have partner organizations between Israel and Palestine. So we work very closely with the Greenland Society for Health Development. And that's initially how we got started with Rozana. And that was sort of the beginnings of Project Rozana, was the transportation of children across the checkpoints from Palestine into hospitals in Israel. That was the initial connection. I think that the medical community, like so many others in helping communities, we sort of look beyond religion and faith and those other obstacles to peace, and decided, that as a medical community, that everybody had a commitment to making the right choices and helping those in need. So I would say that was the initial, was the wheels of hope, was getting children to checkpoints. It was at that point that that on both sides, between the Greenland and the Israelis, that sort of an understanding that what could we do to sort of have to eliminate the need for children to cross the border, and what other things could the medical community do to support growth within Palestine? And so we're talking about building capacity, and by building capacity and helping support them at a grassroots level with a shared common goal, discovering that these are ways to build peace, that we can work together, and that we do have shared goals. Positive health outcomes, shared goals by both communities, reducing trauma, providing psychotherapy services. What can we do to build healthy, sustainable communities? We know that when communities are fiscally and medically supported, when all of this sort of things that we need to survive are readily available to us, it decreases conflict. And we knew that if we could come in and work through the medical system to sort of build these bridges of understanding, that we would be able to help grow both peace, that we would be able to better understand each other, and that we could possibly be able to impact the conflict between these two nations by showing people we have so much more in common than we think we do.
What are the reactions of each to the other in the beginning and at the end of the relationship?
I think what we've discovered is, of course, there's a little bit of suspicion at the beginning. One of the things we need to be careful of is we don't want to come in as the savior. That is definitely not what our mission is. Project Rozana is not coming into Palestine and telling them how to run things. We are a collaboration and we are working together. I think having a basis of medical background and medical history is great. Doctors are doctors, and the minute they start talking to each other about something that's not conflict related, you're talking about a diagnosis or a treatment, that opens up the dialogue. So while there's initially some mistrust and a little suspicion in the beginning, there obviously is a willingness to try, or we wouldn't be 10 years into our program. At the end, what we've discovered is that there is shared trust, ongoing communications. We are currently working on an alumni program so that those doctors and nurses who have been through our program can continue to stay in contact and in touch with each other as a means of support and as a means of continuing to grow the relationship. One of the things that we do when we do our impact studies is at the end is, how long after a project has ended do the participants continue to stay in touch? And we've noticed that it's an over 60% rate.
Wow.
Doctors continuing to reach out to each other, to clinically consult with each other. In the end, medical consultation looks exactly the same as it does anywhere else where there isn't the issue of conflict. We've sort of removed that barrier and found a shared common ground. And then once you start with the basics, you start with, let's share a medical diagnosis. If you spend enough time talking to somebody, it is inevitable that the things that come next in a dialogue is, what do you like to do for fun? Or tell me about your family. And so then you start building those relationships that are so crucial to basically ultimately reaching a successful and peaceful outcome. And so positive, happy, healthy relationships grow and continue to be nurtured and sustained because we've found a common ground between peoples.
Well, it's one thing for professionals to set aside their differences, if you will, the goal is to help the patients, but how did the families react?
Well, we have had nothing but positive impact from families who are grateful for the opportunity. Parents in general, we all want what's best for our children. It doesn't matter where we come from. We now, after 10 years, have built enough of a reputation in these communities where the level of trust has obviously increased over the years. Did it help that Rozana was Palestinian, that her mother came back and said all these amazing things? Absolutely. The more families that go back into Palestine and tell them about a positive experience they had working with Project Rozana and the positive experience they had interacting with Israelis continues to spread the word back in their own countries. We tell stories all the time about the Israeli driver and the Palestinian patient and the bond that grows. Many of our drivers who do the cross-border program, our Wheels of Hope program, will tell you that they've transported the same child 2-3 years. There's no way that you're going to be able to put a child into your car several times a week over the course of several years and not inevitably build a relationship. And I think that's what we're talking about, is that when we get to know each other on a grassroots level, we realize, as I said, and this is sort of my mantra, that how much we have in common and shared goals. And as the word continues to spread in the Palestinian community about the good we're doing, our numbers grow. And as the word continues to spread on the Israeli side about, the positive impact we're having and ways to engage the other community, our numbers of volunteers on the Israeli side continues to grow as well.
So how many participants or patients have you served?
We have, in our Wheels of Hope program, I think we've transported over 3,000 children across the border. I have a statistic. It's an impressive number that we continue to support our Wheels of Hope. Thousands and thousands of children each year. Oh, here we go. We have 2,000 plus volunteer drivers. They've traveled over 2 million kilometers. 20,000 patients have been transferred across the border, and we have transfers, and then we've seen 15,000 sort of inpatient services to those children. Those are significant numbers
Sure.
of impact. And
Sure.
the relation, as I said, it is most often a patient has the same driver. So it's not like a taxi cab service where you don't know who's picking you up. That's part of the success of the program, is that our volunteer drivers continue to work with the same families year in and year out. That's crucial to the peace building process as well, and the relationship building.
And your drivers, are they Israeli? Are they Palestinian? How does
They
that
are
work?
both. So the program on the Palestinian side, the Greenland Society for Health Development, run by the amazing Dr. Akram Amro, they recruit drivers on the Palestinian side to pick the patients up, and they take them to the checkpoint. At that point, the patient and their guardian cross over into the border, into Israel, and where they are met by an Israeli driver who then transports them to the hospital. So there's obviously an enormous amount of coordination needed between the two entities to ensure smooth and seamless transfers.
Right, because they need permissions and so on.
Yes, they do. On the Palestinian side, so the Palestinian medical community needs to submit a request to the Palestinian Authority for permission to transport across it. So we are consistently engaged with the Palestinian Medical Authority, and with the health minister, and with the governing authority in the West Bank, to continue to be able to successfully transport families, patient and guardian, across the border.
Well, beautiful. Let's get into more details of your wonderful work. So let's go over in detail each of your projects. Overall, you divide your projects into training, treatment, and transportation.
That is correct.
And training. So in training, you have the Palestinian Israeli Specialist Nursing Hub, Advanced Trauma Life Support, or ATLS for short, operating together, Binational School of Psychotherapy, and the Scholarship Fund. So I wanted to go over each.
Sure.
And first, what is the Palestinian Israeli Specialist Nursing Hub, and what are we seeing here first off?
What we're seeing here is this picture was taken in Palestine in September. Those are nurses and part of our Project Rozana team. We had done a trip to sort of take a look at all of our programs and see where we are. The Palestinian Israeli Specialist Nursing Hub is something I'm very passionate about. This program was just awarded a grant from the USAID to provide $2.3 million to cross-train 480 Israeli and Palestinian nurses in a variety of subspecialties. So as we had mentioned, isn't that amazing? Yeah, this is a terrific program. Cool. Training together, once again, shared goals. When they're in a classroom, there's not a Palestinian curriculum and an Israeli curriculum. It is a shared curriculum. Yeah. What we've discovered within Palestinian hospitals, there's a lack of capacity in certain subspecialties. Oncology, nephrology are some of the emergency room treatments. So we are, through this grant, able to provide what we call twinning. We've partnered 4 Israeli hospitals with 4 Palestinian hospitals, identified an equal number of Israeli and Palestinian nurses who will be trained and be offered accreditation. So we are currently working with a university in the United States to be able to provide the accreditation, so that these are all BSNs in their degrees from their own countries, but the U.S. certification with the backing of an American university will be able to give the Palestinians, not only will these nurses now be accredited in their field, but it helps those hospitals in terms of their funding. The more accredited and well-trained staff that you have, the easier it is to access funds, not just within Palestine, but globally. So this is...
It's got so many benefits.
This is
obviously first being the patients, the recipients of the care, but it has other benefits as well.
It has multiple benefits. Everything we do is based in mutual understanding and peace building. That is a part of every one of our initiatives. And by working together towards a shared goal, that's how we achieve that. It also helps, as we said, the objective being to build capacity within Palestine and to reduce infant mortality, the rate of diabetes, heart attack, because you've now have trained professionals within their own medical community, so that we've now eliminated the need for all of the to cross the border and the kind of issues that come with having to do that on a regular basis.
Where are they doing the training?
The training is through 4 hospitals. You're gonna have to bear with me while I turn around for this. So we have hospitals on the Israeli and the Palestinian side, and I can tell you what those partnerships are. On the Palestinian side, we have Augusta Victoria Hospital, which has been partnered with Hadassah Hospital. The Ishtari is partnered with Sheba. The Al-Hali is with Asuda Ashdod, and the Ibn Zina is with Rumba. So 4 Palestinian hospitals are partnered with 4 Israeli hospitals, and that's how we're cross-training. Bringing in the accreditation from an American university lends legitimacy to our program, also gives us a much more of a global outreach. Once again, and the university we're working with is a Catholic church-funded university. So interfaith, once again, sort of bringing people together with a shared goal is really what our goal is. The nurses will be trained together. So there will be no separate, everything's done together. The Israelis and Palestinians consistently working together, once again, with the ultimate goal of peace and understanding.
How many nurses have gone through the training?
We have had about 200 so far, but our biggest will be this push 172 nurses have been upskilled in oncology, nephrology, geriatric, and ICU care. With this new funding from the American government, as I said, it'll be 480 nurses evenly divided between Palestinian and Israeli.
So your next program is the Advanced Trauma Life Support, or ATLS, and
so
unfortunately in that area there's
that's a big one, right?
A lot of need for this. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So we know that traumatic injury contributes significantly to the global burden of disease. In this region in particular, the need to have trauma support is pretty significant. I think what a lot of people may not understand about trauma training is that it's an entire team. It's not just doctors who need to be trauma trained, but it's the nurses and the medical technicians. So it's a really comprehensive program. What you're seeing in the picture are the physicians. What I love about this picture, and probably with the exception of the woman whose back is to us, is that you would not be able to tell from looking at the picture who's a Palestinian and who's an Israeli. And that's really sort of the point of the program. In moments of need, which trauma support always falls under, we don't want to spend the time with Israeli Palestinians. So cross training has been really crucial to making sure that this program works completely. We want to make sure that we are optimizing and standardizing trauma care. So the ATLS course is actually an international program that our doctors from both sides are participating in. Once again, I had a chance to sit in on one of the training sessions. The women were ruling that the men were. It was actually very nice to see that women on both sides, Israeli and Palestinian women, who were not afraid to speak up and sometimes correct their male counterparts. Not something you often see in Palestinian communities, where that's not always the norm. What I love about what we're doing and within the medical community is that what people were in this training program deferring to expertise, and I think that's really what our goal is. This program the course has proven to increase the survival of trauma victims, and it is also a required medical qualification for most international programs for fellowship. So we're able to build their skill set by going through this program that offers them opportunities to engage in other sort of fellowship programs and residencies. It's also a train the trainer program, so that we're able to take these trauma trained physicians back into their communities and be able to train additionally support staff within their own hospitals.
Where are they doing the training?
The training at the hospitals that I had mentioned, the same hospitals that we're using for our nurses training. We use the trauma support program goes through Wolfson. That program also just received a $600,000 grant from the USAID, once again from the government. based around understanding and Middle East peace building. So that is out of Wolfson Medical Center.
And they're where?
Wolfson is in Israel.
Is in Israel.
So those doctors, the Palestinian doctors are actually coming to Wolfson for a joint training. So the Palestinian doctors every day are crossing through the checkpoints. You have to give respect and appreciation for if you've never crossed over the border or crossed through the checkpoints, it can be a lengthy process. And so these doctors are incredibly committed to the impact that they know that they can bring back to their own hospitals by daily going through this back and forth, cross checkpoints to get trained to bring back to their own communities. And that's a program that continues to support once they've graduated as well.
How long does it typically take to get through the checkpoint?
The checkpoints, the doctors have special passes. So on any given day, it's at least an hour, sometimes a little bit longer. So you really have to plan, if you have to be at the hospital at 7 a.m., you want to make sure you're at one of those border checkpoints probably by 5 a.m. So we're talking about a high level of commitment to make sure that they, this is not I don't feel like it today kind of program. These are doctors who really believe in what they're doing and understand the importance of making sure that they're bringing back the programs. This is a Rozana situation. This is, if the hospitals in Palestine are equipped to handle trauma victims, then we're going to be able to, we're going to see an increase in the number of children and adults who don't die unnecessarily because the hospitals don't have the capacity to treat what they're seeing.
Wow. Just every day saving lives.
This is one of my favorite, the Binational.
What is the Binational School of Psychotherapy?
So the Binational School of Psychotherapy, it's a program, Palestinians and Israelis working together to heal future generations. As we know, the conflict has been forever. It eventually takes its toll mental health wise on both sides of the border. And, I think globally, not just this, but with other things, there's a huge mental health crisis out there, especially for our young. And I think that's not something we've generally focused our energies on. And I think that's a global issue. I don't think it's just an Israeli-Palestinian one, but you look at any child who's in the middle of a conflict, I'll use the Ukraine and Syria. We have sort of historically not really focused on children's mental health and the impact that years and years of trauma have on them. And that's what this program really is about, is making sure that we are training Israeli and Palestinian psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers to be able to address the very, very specific needs that come from children living in areas of conflict. And there's been a crisis in care for these children. So we want to make sure that we are dealing with acute child and adolescent trauma and that we've got the staff to meet the demand out there. The Binational School is actually on track to become a World Health Organization, a WHO certified program, which we are extremely proud of the work that we're doing to ensure the next generation is happy and healthy and prepared to manage and deal with life that comes with living in an area of conflict. This is, once again, this is cross-training between Israelis and Palestinians. We have to date trained, and I have a number for you. It's a 2-year program. We have to date trained 60 mental health physicians and looking to grow those numbers in the coming years.
I would imagine post-traumatic stress disorder is a significant part of their training.
It is a major part of their training is PTSD. One of his post-traumatic, and also dealing with conflict and how to deal with the feelings of fear and rage and mental health issues that are very, very specific to children raised in areas of conflict. And so this requires very specialized training run by specialists in the field with special interest in children in areas of conflict. And I think that once we're a WHO certified program, I would not be surprised if other areas such as the Ukraine start reaching out to us to talk about how we have successfully managed the cross-training and also the impact it has on our children. It's really important for us to address the mental health needs of our children, because what we're going to do then, it just becomes a perpetuating problem.
Are there cultural differences in the Palestinian population that cause a need for specialized training?
Interesting. We thought we might have encountered almost a little bit of resistance. As you can imagine, talking about mental health issues is not something that's very prevalent in the Palestinian community. Working to break down those barriers and being able to let children talk about things that are causing them pain is one of the goals of our program. Even within the Palestinian community at this point in time, there's been a greater acceptance and an understanding that our children, and I will that our children, regardless of what side of the, need support and need outlets to be able to discuss the impact that ongoing trauma has had on them. So it took us a while to sort of break down some of those barriers culturally. But have been wildly successful so far in being able to do so. I think there's a greater understanding of the needs of mental health needs of children than we've had in the past.
What about being a woman? I can't help but think about, the differences in the culture between what women are allowed versus men and so on. Does that cause additional mental health issues that you have to address?
We do. The binational schools mostly focused on younger children.
Mm.
So sort of the cultural differences between men and women don't come up as much in the younger generations. I think our biggest hurdle with binational was actually the discussion of mental health issues in general, and having the community understand the importance of it. Gender issues becomes a bigger issue as the women mature. We are very cognizant of the fact that there are differences in the Muslim community, but we can say the same of the Orthodox Jewish community as well.
Right.
The treatment of women, expectations of women and women's rights is a huge part of what we do. I think the world is becoming much more open to that. We're not going to be separating men and women as much as we've had. Do I think that we're going to change the world? No. But I think that it's a fine line and a balancing act of being respectful of other people's cultures, while at the same time being able to give women more rights and more choices in decision making.
Now you have this other program, very cool. It's your scholarship. So this is your first recipient of your scholarship.
We had an unbelievable pool of applicants. And sort of choosing, sort of being able to make the decision, we have, was hard. We had a really good committee to get put together. We had several wonderful applicants. I would love to say that, within the next couple of years, part of our strategic plan is to be able to have more than one scholarship student at a time. That, of course, is based on finances. So Dr. Shaheen is our first recipient in ophthalmology. We tried to put our scholarship program into subspecialties where we saw a true need and sort of needed to prioritize where really is there a lack of capacity in Palestine, and where could this scholarship, where could it have the biggest impact? Ophthalmology is a very underutilized skill in Palestine. So that was what prompted us to make the decision to go with ophthalmology. We had another person who was interested in, I think maybe in hematology, but making that decision went through a committee and with the help of the Palestinians to determine within their own hospital capacity systems, where was their greatest need at this time? Where could we have the biggest impact? It's very easy to sit here in my office in Philadelphia and say, oh my God, I can't believe we're not doing cancer. But we let the Palestinians sort of guide us in terms of where did they need to do their most capacity building. And that's how the ophthalmology program recipient was this year's chosen winner.
And who sponsored the scholarship? How did you get
that was through fundraising and development. So that's where our money comes from. Is, this was not a grant program. This was a development initiative to raise the funds to be able to pay for his full schooling and all the supports that he would need, and for his family to be able to make sure that he has a paycheck, that he can pay his rent, all the things that anybody in a residency program would encounter, but even more so for someone who was going to be focusing their studies in Israel. There were a lot of hoops you had to jump through to get the program. I think that as sort of our pilot program in the scholarship, all eyes will be on the success of this, and this will certainly make our ability to offer more scholarships across other medical subspecialties a lot easier.
So to be clear, he's receiving a scholarship. He's a Palestinian doctor.
He is already a doctor. He already has his licensing, but now his ophthalmology is his specialty, and so he's going for further training. And the advantage being is that he can take his training back into Palestine, start up an ophthalmology clinic at one of the hospitals, and begin to train other doctors as they come through. That's really the whole purpose of the program. So next year's recipient will most likely not be ophthalmology, but will be another area that those hospitals have identified as an area of need.
All right. Next, we're going to get into treatment. So you have two programs regarding treatment. One is Women for Women, and the other is the online clinic. And first, we'll talk about Women for Women. So can you tell us in general what Women for
I know it's wrong. It's like asking. I know you're not supposed to have a favorite child, but if you have to have a favorite child, I would have to say it would be this one for me. This is an extraordinary program that I had the opportunity to witness firsthand out in the Bedouin Desert in September. So what we've done is we've created community health workers, all Palestinian, all female. So there's a gynecologist, general practitioners, phlebotomists, physical therapists, social workers, dentists, obstetricians. And what we do is we bring them out, and that's a picture of the village, one of the villages where we provide care. You can see the depths of poverty. The clinic in this particular village is run out of an old shipping container. And we bring the women in. Yeah. Yes. So not only are we able, so it's just proof that you can provide services anywhere. The team of all female healthcare workers goes out into the community and provides a comprehensive range of services. What's really remarkable is and this sort of almost ties into the telehealth clinic, because there's a crossover. So what happens is, particularly with fetal monitoring or blood sugar, we're able to capture information in real time, and it's transmitted immediately to a hospital in Hebron in Palestine and to one of our partner hospitals, Sheba Hospital in Israel. Those doctors then are online with our community health workers in the desert, collaborating on treatment procedures. So we've been able to see a reduction in Yeah, when you see it happening in real time, this is what somebody's sugar is too high, or somebody's heart rate is too high, or the baby's, the fetal monitor detects something. We are able to reduce infant mortality rates, maternal death rates, the incidence of high blood pressure and uncontrolled diabetes, because they're getting treatment in real time. We're not just out there doing vitals and moving on to the next patient. We're able to, if necessary, immediately treat or transport, if necessary, those patients who typically would not have access to healthcare because it's too expensive or they're too remote.
The cooperation between the Israelis and the Palestinians in this regard is at the hospital where you send information, where the women send information. And are these doctors reaching out? Are these nurses who are going out into the community? Who's going out into the community?
Into the community, our teams include doctors, general practitioners, obstetricians, gynecologists, and then social workers, dentists, phlebotomists, nurses. So it's almost like a mobile hospital. The technology that we're using enables us to capture information in real time. Culturally, it's appropriate because it's an entirely female medical team, so that we are being sensitive to the Muslim population with regard to women and men. But the program is specifically designed to treat women and children in the remote villages. Transport to get women from these villages to go into they typically would not go to a hospital for obstetrical care, for prenatal care. The infant mortality rates and fetal death rates in Palestine are relatively high, because if you're this far remote out and there's a problem, there's no way to detect it. By being able to transmit information in real time, we're able to immediately diagnose and treat, transport if necessary.
Wow.
So we're reducing all kinds of some simply treated medical conditions that would normally go untreated. And then, of course, we're able to provide immediate and advanced trauma care if necessary for those who are in immediate distress.
That is just so incredible. That is wonderful.
Seeing it
And-
live doesn't begin to, the pictures don't begin to capture how amazing this program. When we were there, we were greeted by the sheik, and he sat with us and invited us in. We sat in his tent for tea, and we talked about the mutual respect and the understanding that happens when we work together collaboratively. It's a really beautiful thing to be able to sit in the tent of a Muslim sheik in Palestine. Is not something I would have ever imagined that I would do. And we just sat there as people, as parents, as grandparents, with an understanding that we just want the best for our families. I think that was the big takeaway that I would have never expected to have happened.
Yeah, I just quoted a Rabbi Sachs who said, meeting with people who are different than you realize how they are the same as you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
That's ultimately really what it is, when you sit down and talk to people as people, you find you have far more in common than you think. These families, they want the best for their children also. This is a remarkable program. The other advantage is that while they're remote and it's difficult for them to access hospitals and medical treatment, everybody has a cell phone. And the advantage of cell phones is, once again, now once our team leaves, they have contact. So if we're asking someone to check their blood sugar, once again, that information gets transmitted, whether the team is there or not, to a doctor and the hospital. And so that these patients are being monitored in a way that they previously would not have had access to.
Wonderful. And your online clinic?
So the online clinic is the same thing. We're providing an opportunity for those who can't get to their treatments. And the example I use is that most families, the average income in Palestine is $1,000 a month. From these remote villages, transportation is $100 round trip. Well, these families don't have $100 round trip. As I said, the advantage is everybody has a cell phone. So once again, once connected to our community, we're able to transmit. We can ask people out in the middle of the desert to take your blood sugar and transmit this information, or they can call a doctor and get a face-to-face, just like we're doing now, through their cell phone. They can have a consult with a doctor who can then determine whether or not additional treatment is needed, whether we need to send our team back out, or whether we need to find ways to transport the patient to a hospital. So cutting down on risk of heart attack, stroke, diabetic shock, any kinds of trauma. And then, of course, all of the fetal monitoring and the maternal health and the maternal, fetal death rate. We've seen a decrease in those numbers because we've been able to actively engage and to provide treatment before it becomes crisis or trauma based.
When I was speaking previously with Project Rozana, we were reviewing the state of health for Palestinians, and I was given some remarkable and surprising statistics. So one of the things I was really surprised about was the state of health for Palestinians. So can you talk about the non-communicable diseases remaining the #1 cause of mortality, 2/3 of the deaths?
Absolutely. Well, once again, if this is access to care. A lot of what could be prevented, especially in the remote communities, could be avoided. We're talking about things like heart attack, stroke, diabetes, things that are actually treatable. Sexually transmitted diseases. These are the kinds of things that, if diagnosed and treated early on, we can see a drop in numbers. The problem is they're remote. They don't go out into the communities. Access to medical treatment and care has been a huge challenge. It's expensive. This is about access. And so by being able to bring medical treatment out into areas where these communities typically haven't seen it. We know the incident of giving birth under the age of 18 is relatively high. We know there's a significant amount of intermarriage within these communities, which leads to congenital birth defects long-term through families. They do not have access to sexual health, reproductive health training and education.
If I could interrupt, I mean, I was
Please do, yeah.
shocked. 40% of marriages are with related individuals,
That is
which
correct.
causes a prevalence of hereditary recessive
Mhm.
diseases. Can you expand upon that? Because that's not something
Sure.
that
Well, we've
we're
seen this, you know,
familiar here.
sure. One of the classic stories is a European. It's the Habsburgs. It's the British royal family. What happens when family members marry family members is that it creates a line of congenital defects. Hemophilia is one of the big ones. So these, and the more that you marry people from your own family, the higher the incidence of these kind of congenital defects. We're not going into these communities and telling them to stop what they're doing. But what we can do is we can catch some of these diseases ahead of time and be able to treat them so that they don't become, in essence, a death sentence over something that could have been treated had we spotted it. And being able to have medical records and histories on people that as these marriages continue, we at least now know in advance the chance or the prevalence of, because they've married, we're looking at someone potential passing on hemophilia or a sexually transmitted disease. And now we can go out and educate potentially about safe sex practices, ways to treat communicable diseases, so that we are now, for future generations, preventing this kind of genetic issues that would normally have sort of been almost a death sentence for a lot of these unborn children.
And
as I said, we are not changing the culture.
Right.
We're trying to address the issue medically rather than culturally, which I think is the appropriate approach.
The perinatal and congenital malformations cause 10% of deaths. Wow.
Mhm.
That is so sad. And that's because of the
intermarriage. Yeah, you're those genes, that whatever those genes are that are causing that, the more that you intermarriage with, marry family members, where you're perpetuating the malformation, or you're passing on the genes that are creating these congenital defects.
And the infectious diseases, 8.1% of deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's access or lack of access to
That's,
healthcare?
It's a couple of things. One is lack of access to healthcare, and two, it's a lack of understanding. It's a population that has not been typically educated. I look at things in this country whenever there's, I can use the pandemic as an example. Education and teaching our community what you needed to do to stay safe was paramount to the success of us sort of being able to move through the pandemic. And so we knew early on that wearing masks before we were all vaccinated was a great way so we can use those same kinds of educational opportunities to train the community on how they can best prevent these kinds of things, how to take care of yourself. And that includes also things that we do. We deal with nutrition and dental health. There's lots of things that impact our health that are not necessarily medical based. Good oral hygiene is crucial to physical well-being. If you have bad teeth, then chances are you're going to have heart issues and stroke. You put yourself at risk for stroke. So really educating the community, not just on the medical side, but sort of a holistic approach to medicine, about the right kind of diet, eating healthy, brushing your teeth, exercise. All the things we talk about here are the same lessons that we're working with in the community in Palestine, to teach them those sort of self-care to help you and your family be healthy and sustainable moving forward.
Oh, I was so sad to read that 29% of women experience intimate partner violence. Do you know how that compares to, say, in the United States?
No, I do not, but I would not be surprised, to be perfect. It's one of those things that even in this country, there's still a stigma attached to it. Now, one of the things that we need to also recognize is that we need to be culturally sensitive and culturally aware. We obviously do not condone domestic violence, but I would say that a lot of the issues of domestic violence are not cultural. I think that if we take a look at domestic violence globally, domestic violence comes from a lot of things. A lot of it comes by economic status, mental health issues, access to food and water, sort of the basics that we need to live generally impact incidents of domestic violence. So if within these communities we can provide financial resources, employment opportunities, job training, education, access to clean water, which is a huge issue in these communities, clean homes, all of these things that we need to lead healthy, productive lives. And then you throw trauma and conflict into it, it's not surprising that the incidents of domestic violence are high amongst the people who are almost in a constant state of trauma. Our response to trauma is so we want to find ways to mitigate the trauma that occurs. So when we're talking about the non-communicable diseases, we're talking about cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, cancers, all of these are actually treatable, provided we have the information ahead of time. And so one of the advantages of really bringing what we're doing into the community and training the trainers is to be able to diagnose and treat ahead of time. And it's an access issue. If you can't see a doctor, if somebody's not monitoring these things, then they go unchecked, and unchecked then become, you have a history of high blood pressure, it's untreated, you're passing those high blood pressure genes, you're passing the diabetes on to future generations.
And they say that 250,000 require mental health help. Can you talk a bit about that?
I think those numbers, I think globally, I think we're seeing actually an increase in mental health needs across everybody. But now you throw in constant conflict, you throw in lack of access to health care, poverty, lack of access to food, just the basic necessities of life. And it's on a day in, and that's sort of a day in and day out basis. It begins to impact your sense of well-being, your sense of security, particularly in children. Children need to feel safe, secure, loved. And if every day you're sort of facing what must feel like an uphill battle, and you're hungry, and you don't have access to food, clothing, shelter, then it impacts your mental health and your well-being. And that's why being able to provide psychotherapy services, trauma-based, to children to help them manage their feelings, and to be able to provide them with a sense of hope and help them figure out what comes next, and teach them to how they can manage their trauma and their feelings, will create ongoing generations that are better equipped. As I said, we would love to fix the conflict, but if we can't, then let's find a way to help our children manage and navigate this bumpy road, while at the same time being able to be children and do the things that, being able to have a childhood, which everyone is entitled to have.
Right. Well, the next project we're going to talk about is certainly one of your primary projects, is Wheels of Hope. It's your transportation project, and it's support for Israeli and Palestinian NGOs that provide free transportation to Palestinian patients and their caregivers from the West Bank and Gaza who require treatment in hospitals inside of Israel. And you alluded to them and mentioned to them, but let's give them their just due. Let's talk. Can you talk about these pictures?
So this was taken in September. The children in these pictures and the women have all been participants in our program. Getting across the border can be a challenge. There are restrictions on how many people can cross, who can cross, so it's usually a parent or guardian out of the West Bank. Currently, we are operating only in the West Bank. As I had mentioned, I think previously, so if you live close to the border, that's great. If you're a little bit further out, it becomes a challenge. So it could cost you hundreds of dollars in transportation services alone just to get your child the treatment that they need. So what Wheels of Hope has done is partnered with as I said, we run the Palestinian on the Palestinian side, and it's all volunteers. So a Palestinian driver goes and picks up the child and their caregiver, brings them to the border checkpoint. They cross the border from Palestine into Israel, where they're met by an Israeli volunteer driver. And we work with two organizations on the Israeli side. We work with Humans Without Borders and Road to Recovery. Both have the same mission. On the Israeli, they pick up the child on the Israeli side and transport them to the hospital for treatment. Some of these children are crossing several times. If you're talking about a child who's getting dialysis or a child who's getting chemotherapy, it's often more than once a week. These children would die without this service because the cost of crossing is prohibitively expensive to those families. And this is not something that can be done remotely through telehealth. What's beautiful about this program is that the relationships that have been built from our participants, as I've mentioned earlier, this is not a taxi service. You know who's picking you up, and it is often the same driver for years and years. We recently had an article on our social media written by one of our drivers who had transported the same, who unfortunately passed from cancer, but he had transported this child for 2.5 years. It's not, you can't help but form a relationship. And we've had people on the Palestinian side who said that they were initially afraid to get into the car with an Israeli driver, and they weren't sure they could trust them, and they weren't sure they would really be taken to a hospital. That natural distrust goes away with time, and these relationships become very real and very personal. So the Road to Recovery program at the end of the summer every year takes all of the children in the program. They spend a day at the beach. So it's the Palestinian drivers and the children and the Israeli drivers and then we bring families together. And what you end up seeing is just families on the beach having a great day. You can't tell who is who or what is what, because that relationship is so strong. And to watch these families come together with a shared purpose of helping a child is powerful and very moving. I'm not much of a crier, but I cried an awful lot seeing this, because you can't.
I don't doubt it. I'm getting all teary-eyed listening to you.
It's extraordinary. And it's painful when a child passes. Anytime a child dies, it's sad. But that relationship between the drivers and the family has continued. We've had drivers who the child may have passed 2 or 3 years ago, but that driver has developed such a relationship with the family that they stay in touch. That's really what Project Rozana is about. It's not meant to be transactional. It's really meant that we're developing relationships and showing the world what could happen if we would just spend a few minutes getting to know each other.
Absolutely. Organization after organization that I talk to, once they meet each other, it's a simple thing, actually. Once they meet each other and realize the other is just human like them,
right?
Yeah, there's all kinds of complications, but that is, as a first step, is just crucial, and is the impact is shocking how strong an impact just meeting one another is. And it's beautiful on the one hand, and it's extremely sad on the other, that the assumptions about the other are so extreme and ugly that they've been raised to believe the other isn't human, and once they meet, they're like shocked. And
teach hate. We're not born to hate.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think one of the things I love so much about what I do is that, it's talking about peace and loving each other. And I, as an old hippie, that really speaks to my soul. We talk about about Northern Ireland a lot, and what, you're talking about from the outside looking in, people could, how could this possibly be? They're Protestant. What's the difference? I think we can look at Israel and Palestine in the same light. Same people, same goals. As humans, we are all the same. We want to get up. We want to be able to pay our bills and be with our families and enjoy all the things that life has to offer. And if we were to take out, the things that are sort of the barriers to us being able to reach that sort of consensus as humans, boy, we'd be a lot farther along, and there'd be a lot less conflict in this world. People are generally good and kind and decent. We get all kinds of things into the mix that causes this conflict. I would like to think in my lifetime that we'll be able to see peace between these two nations. We certainly have significantly more in common than we probably think we do. And watching the interactions and watching people work together and laugh and share a meal and have conversations about everything. I had amazing conversations with moms about the terrible twos or how obnoxious teenagers can be. It's a universal, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter where you come from. And once you start having that, you think, well, how could this be? And I think that's really what we're working on, is to show the world what we're actually capable of.
Yeah. I know when I never understood boarding schools for teenagers until I had a teenager. But
yeah. Well, and then I can tell you in their early 20s, what happens is I tell people I don't have a conversation with my son. I have a lecture, because he knows everything. It's a universal thing. You could sit down to any mom with a teenager and you're going to have the same conversation, and it doesn't matter where you're from. I find that fascinating and hopeful, because I think, honestly, I think this is the kind of thing that opens people's eyes and makes them realize that the world could be a better place if we would just stop for a second and talk to each other.
right. Do you have any stories from the program about people who've been helped?
We do. I tell this story, and I have it in writing. It's through our Wheels of Hope program. It was a little boy that the Israeli driver had met 2.5 years ago, and this young man was getting treatment for cancer 2 or 3 times a week crossing. So they developed this exchange. The bond was so strong that he ended up knowing every member of this child's family. And he could tell you intimately. He loved baseball and the kinds of hobbies. Really, you spend that much time with somebody, you get to know them. Trips to the beach with the family, shared holidays with the family, so that when this child passed, this driver's heart was broken. Because, and this young man also has a younger sibling with cerebral palsy. So this is a family that had one child with cancer, one was like, the Israeli family and the Palestinian family have grown close. Now this child has passed, but that relationship is sustained. And these are two people who call each other cousins at this point. Shared joys, shared tragedies are now between the two of them. And it's not, the relationship didn't stop because the child died. The relationship actually grew stronger because of the bond that developed between these two families, that now they share bar mitzvahs and weddings and coming of age events between the two families. I think this is beautiful. And both will tell you that when they originally signed up, there was a lot of skepticism and a lot of uncertainty, and certainly trust has to be built. It doesn't happen right away. But if you consistently show up, you're there every time that child needed to cross the border, both on the Palestinian and the Israeli side, you can't help but develop a bond and feel a sense of commitment and community, and that you are making the world a better place, even if it's just for one person for that period of time.
What are your biggest obstacles for your program?
I can tell you the biggest obstacle. So, when I came on board, I thought, this is amazing. Everybody's going to want to be a part of it. Nope. That's not. The biggest obstacles are, there are still people who do not wish to attach their name to anything having to do with Middle East conflict. There are people who feel that by working together with the Palestinians that we are normalizing a situation in the Middle East. And we get pushback on both sides, from both the Jewish, I'm going to use Judaism and the Jewish side and the Muslim side, that we are that by doing this, we're sort of saying what's happening over there is okay. That's normalizing it. That's not our mission. There are people who think that we are foolish, that we're trying to, it's like putting your finger in the dike to stop the water rushing through, that we can't stop what's happening in the Middle East. That is really surprising to me. To me, this is a beautiful, peaceful mission. It's building bridges. It's trying to make the world a better place. And so I think I was surprised at the number of people who, it's not that they don't believe in peace in the Middle East. They just think that this is a pipe dream and they do not wish to be associated with it. And that, and then of course the usual suspicions from both sides. I won't work with Jews. I won't work with Palestinians. They want to kill you, and that comes from both sides. Misconceptions about what's happening and what we're trying to do has been probably the biggest obstacle. But I would say that for the most part, once I start talking about it and I make it personal, and to me it's a person, and I tell the personal stories and share the stories, I've encountered far less resistance. I think that there will always be people who don't believe in and won't want to support this. And there's people who love conflict and people who thrive on it. And those are those people you'll never change. But I think that when I talk to moms and dads, and the interfaith community has been a huge supporter. I think that was a huge surprise to me too, that this is not just a Jewish, Muslim, or Israeli Palestinian, that we have a huge interfaith support from the Christian community who feel very committed. Yeah, it's a beautiful cooperation between, it's a multi-faith initiative.
Very cool. Very cool. So I do have to ask as your last question, I always love to ask, why'd you get involved with all of this? Why? You're in the US. What drove you to this?
So I have, interestingly enough, I had always assumed international humanitarian work has always been of interest to me. And I have spent almost the majority of my career working in some pretty challenging communities in my area. I think, previously worked at what's considered the opioid capital of the United States. So the challenge has never been there, but to be able to engage at an international level has always been of interest to me. And to be able to engage with cohorts in Australia and Dubai and the European Union really just reconfirmed the commitment that most people have to making the world a better place. It is exciting at this stage of my career to be able to engage globally to a central cause. I basically have taken the work I've done regionally and just sort of blew it up into an international experience. I find it challenging. I think at this stage of my career, I was looking for a new challenge, and this certainly meets the requirement. So I really needed to wrap my head around Israeli-Palestinian relations, history of conflict in the Middle East, how to engage globally with people of different backgrounds. I think to be at this stage of my career and be able to have that challenge ahead of me has been the reason I wake up super early every morning and can't wait to get started. And I think it's wonderful at this age to be able to still have that feeling that my brain is constantly active, and I wanted to end my career on something where I could potentially have global impact and really go to bed at night knowing that I'm doing my best to make the world a better place. I'm an old hippie.
Mazel tov. Well, thanks so much, Ellen. Project Rozana truly works on peace in the most sensitive and empathetic situations. Next week on November 29th, we'll be ending the year with an exciting series. Between the contentious Israeli elections, the continued violence, and the two-state solution that seems dead, it may be hard to believe there ever will be peace between the Jewish Israelis and Palestinians. Yet, week after week on Peace with Penny, we show you that there is hope and that there are many people who work on peace between the two peoples every day. We just don't hear about it on the news. The two-state solution has been discussed since the 1930s, yet it's still nowhere close to being accepted by both sides. So we must look at alternatives. Peace with Penny, although not a political show, is always willing to look at peace from all directions. In the next Penny episodes, we'll end the year looking at some options of alternatives to the two-state solution called federation models. There are a number of federal proposals on the table. Of course, in this land, not everyone agrees on the exact formula that will work, but they have been willing to discuss their models. The first option we'll look at is called the Abrahamic Movement. The Abrahamic Movement is a group of grassroots Israeli and Palestinian activists dedicated to formulating a peace plan for the Holy Land, using a federal structure with Abraham as its unifying spiritual and cultural symbol. The model they have developed is based on a paradigm called Abrahamic federalism, recognizing Abraham as the powerful unifying symbol that Jews, Christians, and Muslims can come together and agree upon. The Abrahamic movement seems to directly address Israeli and Palestinian concerns and each people's love for the land, while also convening a third segment of the government to play a unifying and administrative role as a federation, similar to other countries such as the United States, Canada, Switzerland, or 25 other countries. It has worked for these countries, and they believe it can work for this small, viciously contested country in the Middle East. Why not join us and hear what these learned people think will work? Get ready to open your ears and your hearts to a new alternative plan. Does it make sense? You be the judge. We hope you'll join us. In the meantime, we pray that everyone someday will live in peace, shalom, and salam.